Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for kind of an unscheduled impromptu CEO series for the network. We are glad you're here and glad to see your faces. If you haven't turned your camera on, it's a lot more fun if you do. We won't require it, but it would be great if you would turn your camera on so we can see your faces. First thing we always want to do is thank our sponsors, because all of the programming and events that we get to do as part of the network are directly related to your investment in the network and our sponsors' investment in the network. And so I'd like to first thank our presenting sponsor, Old Missouri Bank, our gold sponsors, Dickerson Park Zoo, Guarantee Bank, and Neal and Newman, and our silver sponsors, American National Insurance, Brocade Janitorial, Central Bank, Central Trust Company, KPM CPAs and Advisors, and TLC Properties. So you can all kind of do a virtual clap for them like we would in person. We would also like to thank our CEO Series sponsor, BKD. And so I will hold up the swag. And so for those of you who are saying, well, that's not fair, he's holding up his own company's swag. If your company sponsors the network, and if you send me swag, I will hold up your swag while talking about your company. So keep that in mind for future sponsorship opportunities in the upcoming Reach campaign, and if you've got swag laying around your office that you think I could benefit from. So thanks everybody for jumping on. To make sure, I think almost everyone is on mute, but if you're not on mute, that probably is a good idea. If not, we will let Katie mute you. We will have some time for questions with our guests here at the end of the day. So as we're going along, if you have questions that you would like posed to Clay or to pose to Clay, please just type them in the chat bar, and we will keep those and save those for the end, or maybe work them in as we go along. So been an interesting few months here in the Ozarks, and no one has potentially been more front and center in our community than our Health Director, Clay Goddard, who is with us today. And so Clay, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to speak with our group. I know your time is precious, but I know this group is interested in learning from you today, you know, where we've been, where we're going, and a little bit more about you and the health department.
I'm so excited to be here. You don't know this, but you constitute my favorite demographic that I've ever worked with. I've worked with traditionalists, with baby boomers. I'm a Gen Xer, but it's really been our young professionals that have been a real buoy to me, particularly through this crisis, but even before. So I'm really excited about this opportunity today, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Clay. Well, we're appreciative of you and your leadership. Let's just kind of start with the basics for those of us who don't know you very well. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Springfield, Greene County, and maybe a little bit about what you do as a health director on a day-to-day basis when we're not in a pandemic.
Sure. I was born in Kansas City, and my parents moved me here in 1971, and I went to elementary school at Pershing. And then I like to joke around that that my parents exiled me to Willard. That's just a joke. Nobody take offense to that. But I went through junior high and high school at Willard. And I took a little bit of a roundabout journey through college. I wasn't a good fit at first, and I struggled a little bit. I'll tell you something not a lot of people know. I flunked out of college. I flunked out of SMS. And I still have the academic suspension thing in a frame. And I landed in the U.S. Coast Guard for 4 years and really kind of grew up and got some really wonderful experiences. Lived in New York City and in New Orleans, of all places. And when I came back, I had a new sense of purpose. And finished a degree in political science, and then had that, oh crap moment, what do you do with a political science degree? So I went and got a master's in public administration, and I had the full intention on going back into the military, into the Air Force as a health services administrator. And lo and behold, I ended up in an internship at the Springfield Greene County Health Department. And I realized within 2 weeks that I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And so I've stuck around and went from intern to the corner office. And it's been a wonderful 25 years. I work with incredible people on incredibly complex issues that really run the gamut from animal control to controlling zoonotic illnesses. And we do a lot of work in the community that you never ever know about, but it's such a rewarding experience, such rewarding work, and what an incredible group of people that I have walking alongside me during that journey.
That's great. I mean, SMS is right on par with Harvard, and so, you know, it's understandable. Not everyone makes it through, so, it's okay. Talk to us a little bit, Clay, about the health department. I think, you know, the health department I know is somewhere that I, you know, have not come into contact with a lot. Maybe give us a little bit of a commercial about what the health department does for our community.
Well, today is our 147th birthday, believe it or not. So we've been around for a while. I'm the 22nd director, and we do things that you probably would never know that we were involved in. But some of the more forward-facing things that you hear about are restaurant inspections, for example. But we also run a clinic that focuses on sexually transmitted diseases. We do disease investigation work, case management for high-risk pregnant women and newborns. And we also have a whole a division that focuses on chronic disease control. And up until recently, we had been talking a lot about behavioral health and what we consider to be a behavioral health crisis in this country, as well as substance abuse and those sorts of things. So we really consider ourselves to be a chief health strategist for the community, working hand in hand with social services and with our healthcare delivery system to really lift everybody up so they have an opportunity to live a healthy, happy life.
Now, you mentioned your background is in, you know, political science, public policy. Are there medical professionals, medical doctors on staff at the health department?
I do have a chief medical officer. Her name is Dr. Nancy Yoon. She also has an MPH, and she's a fairly new addition. We were able to bring her in from the Indianapolis area. And then additionally, we have a ton of nurses and people that are educated in the sciences. But what you find with public health is that it really ends up being a landing place for a diverse set of educational and experience backgrounds. And I really think that that ends up being a really nice benefit, because we're able to look at issues through a multifaceted approach, and everybody brings something unique to the mix. And you find that to be fairly common in this field. When you're able to look through multiple lenses at an issue, sometimes you come up with unique approaches to issues that are very, very complex in nature.
Very good. I guess my assumption is that most counties in Missouri have a health department. How is ours, I guess, structurally? Does the health department report to the county? Does it report to city council? I guess talk to us a little bit about how you fit in within our local government.
So we're a consolidated department, but I serve really two masters, if you will. We're all city employees, and the core of our budget comes from the city of Springfield through a property tax. But then we also work for the county. And so I directly report as well to the county commission, and they provide us funding through general fund, through their sales tax. Additionally, then we receive state dollars and federal dollars that are passed through the state. And so really our funding is akin to a three-legged stool. We have local, state, and federal resources that we're able to bring to bear to deliver services. I have 115 FTEs, and so we're a little bigger than a lot of people think that we are. But you're right, there are 114 separate autonomous public health departments in the state of Missouri, and they range anywhere from 5 employees all the way up to probably close to 300 employees at St. Louis County.
That's interesting. You mentioned when you started your internship, within 2 weeks, you knew that this is where you wanted to be. Tell us a little more about what it was, what excited you, what intrigued you, and I guess maybe combined with that, I'm confident you could have potentially had opportunities to do this in other counties. What is it about Greene County that made you stay?
Well, I love solving problems, and there is no routine day in this field. I've dealt with things as varied as monkey bites to foodborne outbreaks, and for me, every day I get thrown something that I didn't see coming, and so really, as a guy that loves public policy. And loves to solve problems, this just ended up being a perfect fit. And I can't remember what the second half of your question was. I got lost.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of why you loved it. I guess, why stay here? What about Greene County made you want to stay here as opposed to pursuing other opportunities?
What a great place to raise a family, number one. And so for me, I've got 3 children, and so it's just ended up being a perfect place to land, and it worked out that I was able to promote into the director's position in a timely manner. So all the stars aligned, and here I am, and I'm really happy that I was able to stay here through my entire career.
Tell us about your family. Brag on your kids a little bit.
Well, they're all off the payroll. So those of you that have kids, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We just graduated my oldest with a bachelor's degree in business from Middle Tennessee State. She lives in Nashville. My stepson is here and is gainfully employed. And my youngest daughter is a newlywed, and she lives in Little Rock with her husband. He's finishing his engineering degree at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock. And we just found out that she's pregnant. So I'm going to have a grandbaby on the way at the end of December. And I'm really transitioning into a new stage in life, and I'm excited about
it. Congratulations. I know for me, being a dad is the most fun thing I do. I can't imagine what being a grandpa is going to be like. And so that you will enjoy that to new end. Clay, I remember March 5th, we were at Good Morning Springfield, and we don't always have you speak at Good Morning Springfield, but Chamber leadership had you talk about this potential thing we were seeing that had come over from China, and we were looking at New York and this virus, and we were still gathering together. And at that point, there was some, I think, joking in the lobby about shaking hands and that we weren't going to do that, and we were going to fist bumps or elbow bumps. I look back and I say, man, Clay was paying a lot more attention to what was going on than the rest of us, because I know I listened to you that morning and thought, oh, that's interesting, but I look back and go, boy, if I knew then what I knew now, I'd have been maybe a little more concerned. When did it really come to you, Clay, that, hey, this is something we need to have an eye on?
Well, let me start by saying I've seen a lot of crazy things in 25 years of doing this. But the one thing that we always worry about most as public health professionals is respiratory viruses. So anytime you hear word about a novel flu or a respiratory syndrome, it perks your ears up. And so I would have heard in early January that they had this respiratory syndrome that they were struggling with in China. And we immediately started having conversations about that because you realize that you would have better luck stopping the wind than stopping a respiratory syndrome from spreading. So it would have been early January, and unfortunately, the federal government was focused on an impeachment trial, and I think that it was pretty clear that we needed to start acting now as a local public health department to get prepared for something that could be significant.
Absolutely. You mentioned that there are things that cross your desk, some crazy things. How often is there something crossing your desk that we have no idea that just doesn't come to fruition?
More often than you really want to know. You know, they say that a good day in public health is when nothing happens. And I think that you all realize now, after 4 months of seeing my ugly face on the television, that you probably don't want to see me as frequently as you do. But we consider ourselves a stealth profession. A good day in public health is when you have no idea what we're doing behind the scenes. But it's a regular occurrence that we're dealing with something that is infectious, and we're trying to get on top of it so that it doesn't become a front page story in the news leader.
So let's go back to March 5th, and it felt like things really accelerated kind of over the next 10 or 15 days at that point. We went from a country that was open and watching this to talking about shutting down. And then I remember one night, all of a sudden, the NBA canceled a couple of basketball games, and it felt like things went really, really quickly after that. I guess from what you can remember, just kind of walk us through that 10 or 15 day period in your mind.
Well, we were drinking from a fire hose because you are dealing with a novel condition, and the science was not clear. But the one thing I've learned in 25 years is that nothing eases anxiety more than action. So we knew that we're dealing with a respiratory syndrome. And really, if you take away some of the unknowns, there are a lot of knowns that you can deal with here. We know how they're transmitted. We know that there are some very basic pieces that you need to build out, such as testing, the quarantine and isolation pieces, and then mitigation. So the mitigation strategies were those stay-at-home orders, and we started to work through the complexities of that. We were making decisions that we never thought we would have to make. Really, I also went back, Ryan, to 1918, and I've drawn a lot of inspiration from history here to look at where the similarities exist, where the differences exist. And interestingly enough, we found that there are so many parallels between 1918 and what we're dealing with in 2020, that there was some really good lessons to learn from that, those history books. We tried to distill all that out and then clearly communicate it. And I really do believe that that's one area where our department excelled, was trying to get that information out to people. We were going to be as transparent as we possibly could. And we really worked hard to do that. And of course, as we've gone through the last 4 months, our knowledge and our capacities have increased significantly, but it's been quite the journey.
Absolutely. Let's make this a little bit Springfield specific. It takes a whole community when you're dealing with something like COVID-19. What have you learned about our community over the last 100 days?
Well, we always like to talk about how great of a community Springfield is and how collaborative they are, or we are as a community. but you never really know what it's going to be like when the chips are down. And I'm so incredibly proud of how this community has come together. This has been a very, very trying and difficult time. And I have felt supported the entire time as a health director. I've had a wonderful working relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, with the decision makers on the county commission and the city council. And then our healthcare systems have been such incredible partners as well. So we are a collaborative community. And I think that that's borne out in the results that we've seen. Matt Simpson did some research yesterday, and he looked at disease morbidity rates for every community in the United States that have a population between 150,000 and 350,000. We have the third lowest morbidity rate for COVID-19 in the nation. That's not because of something that I did or Cox or Mercy or Jordan Valley did. It's what we did together as a community. And man, what an incredible effort this has been so far.
Absolutely. I don't know if that goes on a billboard, but we'll work that, tell chamber staff we need to work that into the marketing materials somehow. You know, come to Springfield, we survived the pandemic. So, yeah. Absolutely. You know, specifically for our young professionals on this call, I think you mentioned it, Clay. This has been a long haul and it's not over. You know, give us some positive news. I'm sure you're keeping up on all the developments every day. And give us some positive news and some encouragement to look forward to here.
So there's you know, good news on the horizon. They're having some luck with their phase 3 vaccine trials. So you know, it is still possible, within the realm of possibility, that we could see vaccines start to trickle in the fall. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And we just have to figure out a way to bridge ourselves there. But I think that you brought up a really valid point. There are a lot of opportunities for a community like Springfield on the tail end of a pandemic. People are finding out that maybe there isn't an advantage to living in a huge metropolitan area. And you know, we've talked a lot about how we can attract and retain young talent. Well, maybe this is an opportunity to grow that talent base and really make Springfield an even cooler place to live and raise a family. Absolutely. We have, in the young professionals group here, we naturally have some parents with young children. Tell us, you know, there's a lot of recommendations out there. The CDC has a lot of recommendations out there. What recommendations do you have for parents with children and exposure? You know, you and I were talking a little bit before this call. I have almost 5, right? She is now a 5-year-old, and you know, keeping a mask on a 5-year-old is borderline impossible. I guess, talk to us about what we've learned about this virus for children and recommendations you have for children. Yeah, you know, it goes beyond the masking. How do you get kids to physically distance? Man, you have my empathy as those of you that have young children. I mean, let's look at the positive news first, is that children are about half as likely as adults to contract this illness. So that's a good thing. There are some unknowns, and our knowledge base continues to build. There are some complications that can occur with some children. With Kawasaki-like syndromic presentation, where they can have some inflammation of their organs and those sorts of things. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. You're going to just have to continue to talk to your kids the best that you can about how they can avoid you know, getting infected by this disease. And I would encourage you to be straight up front with your children. Talk to them about this, because it is a stressful time. It's a stressful time for young parents, but definitely for children too. I can't imagine, you know, what it would be like to be in the middle of the school year, get yanked out of your school, and have to adapt to that idea of learning online. But I would encourage all of you to, and I know you already do, stay in touch with us. We're going to get you the best information out that we can. And we're in daily conversations with our school systems in the entire catchment area, talking to them about how they can best prevent transmission, what the steps would be like to shut down a school if we ended up with a cluster of disease. And the one thing that I'll pledge to you in this scary time is that we're going to always be transparent and give you the information that we have when we have it.
Good. As a group of young professionals, I think sometimes we always want to be doing something. What can we do to help move the ball forward for our community? For Clay, for you in the health department, what's something that this group can do to support you and your team?
Well, number one, you need to be careful out there. We're seeing the most rapid growth in this disease in our young folks. And I'm talking about people in their 20s and 30s. And, I think that we've gotten weary of COVID. We've got some fatigue going on, and we desperately want to get back to life as normal. And I see a lot of head shaking in agreement. I get it. Trust me, I want to get back to normal too. But what we worry about is, even though you as a demographic are a little lower risk for complications from the disease, there's not no risk with this. And if you look at what's going on in Houston, Texas, they're having a lot of young people end up in their ICUs. So my advice, and one way you can help, is continue to abide by those prevention messages. Physical distancing doesn't mean that you have to be socially apart. It just means that you have to engage in new ways when you're together. Some of those ways are keeping those distances, making sure that you're gathering maybe in an outdoor area instead of at your favorite bar or pub. Then the masking issue, of course, is a hot topic. City Council's visiting about that. It's an emotional issue with a lot of different perspectives. We've got a mask there from Jeremy. Thank you for that. Let's have fun with it. I think that it is an important tool in the toolkit. It's something that we should be doing as a community, and it will help bridge us to a vaccine. So if there's a way that we can get rid of the politics of this, go to the science and rely on the science, we can really move the community that direction. It is my experience with the Great Clips exposure and what we've seen in states that have universally gone to masking is that it does make a difference. So hopefully we can get past the controversy with that. I will say, in 1918, there are examples of where it was controversial. There was an anti-mask league of San Francisco in 1918. So we're once again reliving history, but let's see if we can do that together in 417 land.
Absolutely. The favorite mask I saw online the other day said, "Protect Patrick Mahomes, wear a mask." And so for all Chiefs fans, if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for Patrick Mahomes.
Amen.
Yeah. Clay, you mentioned it. This topic of masks has become very polarizing. And I'm pro-mask. I work at an employer who has masks. I have my mask right here. One of the questions that I've heard in the community is, there was some guidance early in this pandemic that masks maybe weren't as effective. Would you want to address that?
So what you're seeing, of course, is we walked into this thing and we didn't know what we didn't know. So we learn all the time. And I actually was a skeptic initially about masking, but not because I didn't think that masking is an effective tool in a clinical setting. I knew that it was. Routinely, if you go to the doctor and they test you for influenza, the first thing they're going to do is put a mask on you to keep you from getting other people sick. Remember that initially we spent a lot of time talking about surface contamination and don't shake hands, and we all walked around with hand sanitizer. We were worried about people getting their hands contaminated and then bringing it to their mouth, nose, or eyes and adjusting a mask. It turns out that while that's still a little bit of a concern, it's not as significant as we once feared. It looks like most of these infections happen from close contact with somebody within 6 feet of somebody who is sick for more than 15 minutes. So what masking does is it will help prevent you from transmitting the virus to somebody else. And since this disease likes to manifest itself as an asymptomatic condition, and we know that you're infectious when you're pre-symptomatic, it's a good idea that we're all masked when we're in close contact with one another. And so what you've seen is an evolution of our science in knowledge. And for me, really the sentinel moment where it really connected the dots for me was when I had 140 people who were in direct contact with a hairstylist while they were in the heat of their illness. And we didn't end up with anybody getting sick out of that cohort. That's pretty remarkable. That happened right here in our backyard. And I think that it's compelling evidence on why we should be engaging in this practice as a community.
Absolutely. One of our member questions, asks, are there initiatives lined up to help make masks either more available or to promote the concept of wearing masks? Is that something that falls under the health department, Clay?
So we work with, we have what's called a joint information center with many of you know Catherine Wall or Cora Scott. They're working on those types of approaches all the time. There's Catherine's in my office. There's a hashtag 417, no? Mask up 417, yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm an old dog. I'm trying to learn the Twitter world. So we're trying to drive this through social media platforms. As far as mask availability, that's going to continue to be a little bit of a challenge because there is a PPE shortage out there. But I see that many of us have engaged in the cloth mask, and really that's what I advocate for. They're more comfortable. And there's something that you can readily get your hands on. And hey, if you need to go old school, just get a bandana and look like an outlaw. You can even, go that path if you need to in a pinch.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got a member question. Springfield Public Schools recently did a questionnaire to its parents about the upcoming school year. Was that something you mentioned? You're in contact with the school district. The question is, was that something you were involved in, or I guess how do you communicate with the school district?
So many of you know John Mooney, and he's one of our assistant directors. He has been on weekly phone calls with school superintendents. He also participates in calls with our university presidents and their staff. And we're just helping them as we continue to navigate this brave new world that we're entering into, and all of the challenges that are going to be inherent in seated classrooms. It's not going to be easy. We're going to learn as we go, but we have been engaged with them since very early in the pandemic.
Clay, you mentioned, inside versus outside, and we're all trying to figure out, there's so much information out there and knowing what to follow. I guess other than the Greene County dashboard on the health department's website, when you're trying to get good information and good guidance, what publicly available sources would you recommend that we look at?
Well, I think that it's best maybe to start with our website. We try to keep our guidance up to date and science-based, and we're continuing to always evolve all of those guidances. But other than that, I would recommend that you stick to those tried and true websites such as the CDC and the World Health Organization. They're going to have factual information. And then a couple of individuals, Ryan, before the call, you talked about Dr. Fauci. Of course, he's one of my heroes. Another guy that I'll throw out there, if you're not familiar with Dr. Michael Osterholm, he's an incredible resource. He's from the University of Minnesota, and he's one of those people that is also on my Mount Rushmore for public health. So I would encourage you to go out and do a Google search on Michael Osterholm. There's a lot of information out there about him and a lot of videos. So those are some really credible voices that will tell you with no political lens that, what's going on in the world.
For those of you who are submitting questions in the group chat, thank you. I'm bouncing around, but we'll get to them all. Question about events. I don't think any of us know exactly what the fall is going to look like. Is it your perspective here today on June 30th, knowing that it could change, Clay, that masks could eventually allow for expanding of capacity limitations for venues as shown in the Great Clips case?
So masks are going to be a piece of that puzzle. Some of the unknowns are, what does it look like to be more tightly gathered together for a longer period of time? We know that masks aren't perfect, but we do think that probably is a piece of an equation that will have some mitigating effect on disease transmission. We're going to just have to navigate this week by week. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I can tell you what's going to happen next week. We're going to just continue to watch for disease trends and try to communicate those. Everybody wants me to look into my crystal ball, and I just haven't had a lot of luck with that so far. How's that for trying to dodge your question?
No, that's just fine. Hector, that question was from Hector at Evangel. He's trying to plan homecoming right now. So, and I've heard Cliff's excited about his new quarterback. So, yeah. we got to see what we can do there. Related to spikes, we've got a question from Chase. We're seeing spikes around the country after reopening. Do you feel like, based on our numbers, that you're seeing a spike like that here in Springfield? And if so, I guess, what guidance in regards to Jeff City and our local government do you have regarding potential spikes?
So we're seeing definitely more cases, and that's not unexpected when you open the economy back up. So we're walking a little bit of a tightrope between disease control and the admitted need to open the economy back up. So what we want to avoid are disease spikes like what they're seeing in Northwest Arkansas and in the Joplin area. And we're not there at this point. There are some structural issues in both of those areas that are really good facilitators for disease spread. Those poultry plants are problematic. And what we're trying to look for here is, what are our corollaries? Where are our vulnerabilities as a community? One of those happened late last week. We ended up with an individual that is in our unsheltered community that tested positive. So we're being very aggressive with testing and trying really hard to make sure that we keep a lid on any potential outbreaks in those settings. We're always worried about our long-term care facilities. And so the one thing I'll tell you all is that testing is the key. And if you know anyone that feels that there's a barrier to testing, I wish that you would reach out to me via email or through some other channel, because I need to know about those barriers. We want anybody that wants to be tested to have that opportunity. And if we can continue to keep our testing as robust as possible, we have an opportunity to keep those major spikes from happening.
Absolutely. We'll go a little bit lighter here, Clay. When you think back 25 years ago when you started the health department in those first 10 years, what did you learn early in your career that you're still applying today?
The hardest lesson for me was that sometimes the best thing to say is nothing. And as a young man, I was trying to prove myself, so I felt like I had to say a bunch of things. And once I disciplined myself and learned that maybe less is more, it did a couple of things. It forced me to listen to people. And when you listen, you actually maybe have the opportunity to be more effective as a young leader. And I found that really some of the attributes in people that I admire the most are those people that listen, they absorb, they hear that feedback loop, and then they're able to use that to inform future action. So that's one thing I always tell my kids is sometimes the best thing to say is nothing, and use that as an opportunity to listen to people, and you'll be more effective as you navigate your career.
Well, that is fantastic advice. From Justin Setzer, what would you say the biggest challenge you personally or your department has faced over the last 100 days?
So it's probably bandwidth. You don't realize this, but doing case investigations, the associated isolation and quarantine piece, and then the contact tracing is an incredibly heavy lift. It's very labor intensive, and it doesn't ever let up. So we're doing this 7 days a week, oftentimes into late at night. And we've done that without additional resources so far. We're going to be adding quite a few positions to help us weather the storm, but we've got some people that have really lived this 24/7 for a while. So I think it's that human capital piece and the fatigue that comes with it.
Absolutely. D. King wants to know, is it true? Is there any truth to the rumor that you have a cot in your office? We're concerned that you haven't slept in 100 days, Clay.
It is true. There's a cot in my office. Now, the good news, D, is that I haven't had to use it yet. And so that's the goal. But I did get one because I really thought for a period of time that I was going to be living here. But I don't know if my wife's happy about the fact that I keep returning home or relieved, but I have been able to keep going home every night so far.
Well, that's good. I feel like at least decently rested Clay is good for our community. So, Clay, I'm fascinated by contact tracing. At a high level, give us, if someone is diagnosed with COVID and you start the contact tracing process, what does that look like? And then what goes into, we get your bulletins, unfortunately now on kind of a daily basis where exposures have been. Are there guidelines as to where what gets it reported and what doesn't get reported?
Yes, so let's start with the contact tracing piece first. So if Ryan, we unfortunately, your name comes across our desk on a positive lab slip, we'll reach out to you, and we really have multiple goals with that contact. Number one, we want to educate you on, what this condition means to you and potentially to your loved ones. But we also want to find out where you contracted the illness and who you might have shared it with, because sharing in this context is not good. And then we will reach out to all of those individuals that we know that you had direct contact with. And we use really the benchmark of, were you within 6 feet of that individual for 15 minutes or more? And that's what we use as the criteria to quarantine people that were potentially exposed. And they have to isolate at home for 14 days post-exposure. We'll offer testing to those individuals in the 5 to 7 day post-exposure window. And so that's basically how that piece works. The second piece, though, is a little more complex. Let's say that you went to, it seems like Walmart always ends up being the place that everybody has to go. If you went to Walmart while you were symptomatic, we opted very early on in this pandemic to be transparent. And we used the South Korean model where they actually use it on their cell phones, but we're not going to do that in the United States. But we wanted to let everybody know that where these public exposures happened, so that you have an opportunity to monitor yourself if you happen to be in that in that setting at the same time as that individual was. We think that this is a good reminder that the disease continues to surround us. We also think that it is an education point for individuals to think through if they have those symptoms, and if that happens, don't go to Walmart, stay home. And so it really is designed to achieve a number of goals, but it's never to punish the business. We found that our business community and business owners have been incredible stewards. They're doing the right things out there. But we do want to be transparent about what's going on in the community from a disease spread perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm convinced everyone goes to Walmart based on your alerts. We'll switch gears just a little bit, and maybe one more question, then we'll go into kind of our final questions here. But the question from Lauren Musto, this is not free. All of this work that has been going on. And so can you talk about funding that our local health department has gotten either from the state or from federal government? And I guess secondly, if there is another federal relief package from a public health perspective, where would you like to see funding devoted for local health departments?
So this is, I got to figure out how to navigate this. We've not seen a penny yet. But there's money on the way. I'm convinced of that. Of course, the county received $34 million that they'll be spending across a broad base of response. But part of that money will certainly come to us. It's just working through the administrative processes and getting a vehicle to get it to us. The state health department has also promised some money to us, and I don't know if you all know this or not, and I see Matt Simpson's on the call. Government's not always really fast. And so there's an old gambler's term, we've bet on the come. And so basically, we've never stopped to think that we shouldn't be doing something because of the resources. Our fundamental mission is to protect lives. And so we've done that regardless of whether the money is going to come. I'm convinced it will take care of itself on the flip side. I will say this, we did receive $350,000 from the Missouri Foundation for Health, which we used to stand up our lab capacity so we're able to do testing in our laboratory. By the way, we're the only public health lab in the state of Missouri that has that capacity. So we're very, very blessed. And then the final thing, I want to tell all of you, thank you. We are in this position because we are well funded compared to the rest of the public health departments in the state. 60% of our money is from local sources. And that is why we've been able to stand up this response. It's because of you and your willingness and your support, your willingness to fund us and your support. So thank you. I don't take that for granted. And we're very grateful that we have the support of our taxpayers and our decision makers.
Clay, I think we owe you the thanks, and if you could see the Zoom chat, there are a lot of our members who are echoing that right now. Very thankful to you and your entire team, and I know you would defer that credit to your entire team. I like to end these interviews with kind of a final 4 questions, kind of 4 quick ones, maybe a little bit off topic. First one, have you found a favorite place for takeout during this pandemic?
So I've been on keto, but when I get really stressed out, we like to do Garbo's pizza and that wonderful house salad that they have. So that's, and I might have occasionally gone through the Andy's drive-through. Yeah, that happens rarely, but it does happen from time to time.
So when you go through the drive-through, what's the order?
You got to do James Brownie with extra peanut butter. That's where I live. So. Awesome. Have you learned a new term or phrase in this pandemic that maybe wasn't part of your vocabulary before? Well, this is old stuff, but very early on, we had a lot of fun here where we were talking about how mass gatherings were so 2019. I mean, we've got a wicked sense of humor here. A lot of the things I don't think I should probably repeat on this call, but we have a lot of fun in the office. It's the way we deal with stress.
Absolutely. So I learned from Councilman Simpson, and it makes sense now with your background from Kansas City that you are a Royals fan, and I've seen your Chiefs mask. Favorite Royal of all time?
Oh gosh, man, and they, 2 separate eras, but I'm going to go old school with George Brett, and then I'm also going to give a shout out to Salvi. So I'm going to put him in my close second place.
Absolutely. And final thing, before COVID-19, our community was deeply engaged in the Ford SGF process and thinking about what we want this community to be. I know I'm a big believer that the faster we can come out of this virus, our community has a real opportunity to grow and set ourselves apart. What's one thing that you think our community should be looking forward or should be thinking about for the year 2040 that we should start on? I usually say right now, but instead I'll say as soon as it's safe to do so.
I think that the biggest predictor for the future of a community is reading at grade level at 3rd grade and kindergarten readiness scores. So if you want to improve the public's health, increase your literacy rates, focus on children in early childhood, and a lot of the problems that we face in government on a daily basis fix themselves. So if you want to encapsulate one perfect public health metric to measure a whole host of outcomes in 20 years, focus on that reading at grade level at 3rd grade. That's where the money should be spent, in my opinion.
Well, again, Clay, thanks so much. I know you have it is an incredibly busy 100 days, and I know our membership is very grateful for you and your team, and that you could take an hour to be with us today. Have a great rest of the week, and I guess I'll leave you with the floor if there's any other reminders or thoughts you'd like to leave with our group to spread to our friends in the masses.
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I see a lot of familiar faces and some people that I'd like to make new friendships with. So if you haven't already, reach out to me sometime, and let's keep fighting through this. Mask up, everybody.
Thank you, Clay, and thanks to our members. Katie, I am usually prepared with what our next event is, but I'm going to look at you and admit that I am not at all prepared for what our next event is. Do we have any reminders we'd like to give the group?
That's quite all right. Before I say that, I did just see one person put in the chat box, what is the best way to reach out, Clay? So if people want to contact you or someone in the health department, what's the best way to do that? Obviously, you probably get 1,000 emails a day, so. You
can reach out to me directly, cgoddard@springfieldmo.gov. And then we're on Facebook and Twitter, and I don't think we're on TikTok yet, but I'm going to get Catherine on that sometime soon. So.
That's awesome. Well, we have a couple of events coming up next month. The goal is to hopefully have those events in person while also offering a virtual option. We'll of course practice all of the physical distancing guidelines and encourage masking. So more information to come on some of those soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Have a great holiday weekend, and be safe out there.